Hey, my beautiful ass, special ass, magical ass goddesses. How are you today? It's me, Kayla, back again with another video. And this is the video I've been dreading the most. I just kind of wanted a lot of you to understand my journey, how I came to the place that I came to, and understanding my power and who I truly am, despite all of the adversities and setbacks that I've been through. And when I tell you I've had my fair share, yeah, your girl's been through it. And I'm glad I can laugh about some of the things that I've been through now, because certainly when I was going through them, a bitch was not laughing. But I've come to a place where I've grown a little bit, and things have kind of changed, and I can look back and understand the lessons in everything, and understand why it all took place and how I used it to make my life better, and instead of being in victim mode and woe is me, and going around hating the world, which I did do for a little bit, but we'll get to that. So yeah, I mean, like, there's just so much, so much, and I don't even really know where to start. Because when I tell you, like, my bad luck was literally like a 15-year cycle, And, also, let me just say this for the record too. A lot of times when I was kind of going through things, especially, when I was more still in my people pleasing mode, and I was still talking to people that I knew I shouldn't be talking to and I shouldn't have been associating with, but I did it anyway. And so when I would go through things, I would, ask for their advice. And, they would always tell me things that didn't help, didn't work. And, when I looked back in hindsight, I'm like, out of all the people that I could have gone to and talked to and asked for advice, like, it's like, why did I go to those people? Because those were the absolute wrong people. Like, at the end of the day, if you ain't been through shit, you can't tell me shit. Like, if I've been through some things, I want to hear through a person that's been through those same things. Please don't sell me any wolf tickets about what you would do if it were you in that situation. If you have not been in that situation, I don't want to hear anything. I really don't. Like, you can't tell me. Yeah, you can try to put yourself in somebody's shoes, but if you don't necessarily understand all of the dynamics that go along with it, just stop trying to have a conversation with me about what you think I should do. So there's that. um, but yeah, so everything that I went through, it was just like a 15-year just battle, just one thing after another, after another, after another. Like, when I tell y'all, like, it was constant. It was almost like life was trying to force me into a cocoon. And I'm so stubborn, because I always want to believe the best in people. I always want to believe that, everybody has good intentions. And that's the thing, a lot of goddesses really need to realize. A lot of goddesses are very empathic. We want to take care of others. We want to help others. We want to see others do better. We want to see others thrive. And so a lot of times we will sacrifice ourselves, what we know is for our greater good, in order to help other people get ahead, in order to help other people better their lives. Meanwhile, you're kind of looking back like, hey, what about me? And they're just kind of like, yeah, whatever, And I did that for so long, where I kept people around that I knew I shouldn't have, out of that love. Like, yeah, maybe they really do love me. Maybe I just, I don't understand their love language, making up all kind of excuses and different things like that. But yeah, so I would probably say, if I had to pick a starting point, I mean, we're gonna do this like fast round. Like, I'm not really gonna go too much into details about each situation, because there were so many different other events, sometimes surrounding it. But it probably all started with the separation of me and my twin flame. We met when we were 17. And we dated for 4.5 years, and I loved that man to death. Like, I mean, we were, like peas and carrots, always together. Even though he went to a different college than I did, we did. I would go and visit him all the time, and we just had a really close relationship. And then we got to a point in our relationship where, he was very critical of me. Always like, you need to change this and you need to work on this. And, I was kind of receptive and open to it. And then after a while, I realized, like, I'm not the only one that needs to change certain things. And so the first time I approached him about changing something, and it wasn't even a big thing. Like, it was, he had left a video game on the floor, like, and he just loved his damn video games. And when I walked into the bedroom, I accidentally stepped on it, and I thought I broke it, but I didn't. And like, he would have been completely pissed at me if I would have broke that, and I would have never heard the end of it. So, I kind of asked him, like, can you just not leave stuff laying around? You do have somebody else that you're living with now. And I, it wasn't long term. We were just living together for the summer. And his response to me was, that's the way I am. That's the way I've been for 20 some odd years. And that's just the way I'm going to be. And I was like, word? like that's your word? Okay. So yeah, needless to say, after that, I wasn't too thrilled. And so we did break up. And it was just kind of like very situationship, afterwards. We talked, we kept in touch. Nothing too personal. We maybe had sex like a couple times, not a big deal. And then he tells me that he started dating another woman. And I was like, okay. So I was like, maybe I didn't handle that breakup in the best way. Maybe I could have communicated, what I was feeling instead of just assuming he would understand what I was thinking by breaking up with him. Like what the meaning was behind that action, right? Squirrel. I'm sorry, y'all. I'm looking outside. So yeah. I tried to go back, am in the relationship, and all the while he still, had her on the side. And the thing about it that pissed me off the most was that every chance he got, he would rub her in my face. When he had returned from college after he graduated, we both moved back to Chicago at the time. And I left. We were in Champaign-Urbana at the time. I left after him, and he had left some stuff in an apartment with some roommates. He's like, can you bring it up with you? And so I go to his friend's house to drop it off to him, and, he's making jokes about his little sister threatening to beat me up, and, he's just like, do you want anything else? And I'm just like, bitch. And so, even when I didn't realize how spiritually gifted I was, like, that gift has always been present in my life. And my intuition kicked off. And so something just told me to look at the cars on the street. And I look at the cars on the street, and I see his new girlfriend's car there. And I look at him, and I'm like, she's here with you? And he's like, yeah. Okay. Bro, you got me fucked up. Like, when I tell you I hopped in my car and you could hear the tires screeching, like, bitch, who do you think I am? Okay. So after that, I was just kind of like, okay, this is like a little game to you. So distanced myself a little bit. We still talked here and there. One day he calls me over and asks to talk, and he tells me that his girlfriend is pregnant. I cursed him out, and I left. Hadn't talked since, right? Fast forward a little bit, not a little bit, a lot of it, because it's been quite some time. Well over 10 years, folks. Well over 10 years. I'm not going to tell you exactly how long, but long a fucking enough, right? So probably it was after a year after my spiritual awakening. I started having tons of dreams about him, like tons and tons of dreams. And I'm just like, what is this? And so, they started kind of letting me know that he was my twin, and, eventually we would be back together. But then I started really getting confused, because then I started getting dreams about other men. And I'm like, okay, that's like white out sending me mixed messages, like, and give a bitch straight message. Like, what am I supposed to do? Right? So, and this is more of a recent revelation, especially with the Taurus new moon. When you have a twin flame, the purpose is for you guys to ascend, right? And in separation, you're supposed to ascend so that you can come back together. Not all twins come back together, because not all twins ascend. that's something not too many people will tell you, right? And so this whole time, I'm getting pissed because it has been a very long time since, we had not been together. And I'm getting very confused. Like, why is this even a thing? Like, why am I even, getting all these mixed messages and dreams and, intuitive hits and, nothing made sense. And, I would always go to my tarot cards and it was just like, bitch, wait for it, wait for it, wait for it. And I'm like, what is it? It was karma, of course, because karma is always a bitch. But it was that realization that it wasn't me that was feeling all of these things. It was my energy being invaded. And I didn't even know it. And when it hit me, like in my mind, like in my head, I was like, bitch, like your boundaries are so weak. You don't even got energetic boundaries. Like it hit hard. Like I was just like, oh, like that's an L. That's an absolute L. So yeah, and I had started getting messages months ago, knowing that he wouldn't ascend. And so, that was something recently that I've learned, to heal from and completely let go of. So yeah, that was kind of what started that 15-year journey, was that heartbreak, right? Fast forward like 5 or 6 months. I mean, it wasn't long at all, y'all. Like when I tell you, like, how they say like bad things happen in groups of 3, like it was like 3 times 5, like years, like 15 years of just straight bullshit. So about 5 or 6 months after I had parted ways with him, my mother died. I was like 22, 23 at the time. And I was completely devastated, right? My father passed away before I was even born. So, at like 23 years old, I'm like officially an orphan. And it was really, really hard because I'm like, I'm still a child. Like it was really, really hard to process. And after she had first died, like and really before my spiritual awakening, like I never could really remember my dreams, right? And so, I learned how to remember my dreams, writing petitions. I intend to remember my dreams every night. And then the dreams that I do remember when I wake up, I write down every night before I go to sleep. I ask my angels and guides to help me remember my dreams. But after she died, that wasn't a time where I dreamt very often, but I kept having this dream because we had her cremated. That was another part of kind of the shit show of the whole thing. Excuse me. But yeah, that was another shit show of the whole thing, was that she didn't have any life insurance or anything. So we had no idea how we were going to pay to have a funeral and get her buried. And, it was just so stressful, to deal with, on top of her death, trying to figure out how we were financially going to be able, to honor her after her death. It was a lot of stress. It was so hard. So that was pretty difficult. Wait, there's more. Yeah, there's more. So then after that, right before the 2-year anniversary of her death, and I mean after her death, like I lost it. Like, I was completely depressed. I had moved in with my sister and my brother-in-law, living with them, still working. I had dropped out of school. I had lost my car. My car got repossessed because I wasn't working, because I was, always just so depressed. Like, it was a hot mess. So a year and a half later, I finally, kind of started getting back on track and, getting some sense of normalcy in my life. Because I had lost my car, whenever I'd go to work, I'd have to take the bus back and forth. And I was still living in Chicago at the time. Actually, I was living in a suburb not far from Chicago at all, called Harvey. Shout out to H-Town. Yeah, I was living out there. I had a boyfriend at the time. Me and him were good friends from high school, and we started dating after high school, and his sister needed a roommate, so I was living with her. And when I had to go to work, I just, walk back and forth to the bus stop and, handle my business that way. Well, I'll never forget that day. It was December 15th, 2007. 10 days before Christmas. Way to kick off the holidays, right? So I'm walking home for the bus stop. And once again, I'm telling you, like, even before I knew about my spiritual gifts, like they were just there. I was at work that day, and at the time I was working as a server at Olive Garden. Olive Garden. Olive Garden. Shout out OG crew. I was working as a server. And towards the end of my shift, like, you know how it gets dark out during wintertime. It gets dark out earlier. And something just kept like nagging at me, like, you know, get home before dark, hurry up and try to get home before dark. Like, get the fuck out of here. But anybody that's ever worked in casual dining can tell you, like, you don't have you have an end time, but you don't have an out time. Like, you know, if your relief comes in at 4 o'clock, the person that replaces you, and you still got 3 tables, unless you're trying to give up your money, you're not going to give up those 3 tables. You're going to stay until those tables are done. And when those tables are done, they're up to those tables. So there's that. But I had this urge to get out, and I couldn't control it. So, I was just stuck at work. So I think I ended up leaving work maybe like about a little bit after 5 or so. So I hop on the bus and I get home. And as I get off of the bus, something just, I walked maybe like a block, and something just like turned around. So I turn around and I look, and there's a guy walking in a hoodie that's zipped up, and there's like a mask over his face. But he's, far back. So I'm just like, okay, whatever. So, I just kind of picked up the pace, walking a little bit faster. I'm walking. Something tells me to look back again. I look back. He's a little bit closer. He's still far away, but he's still behind me. So I'm like, okay. So I keep walking, and now I'm walking even faster. And I look back again, and he's closer. So, Spidey senses started going off. So I pull out my cell phone, and I call my boyfriend at the time. I'm like, so if something happens, at least somebody will hear or know, fucking come look for me. And so we're talking on the phone, and something just tells me, like, look behind you one more time. And by that time, it was too late. I looked behind me, and there was a gun in my face, and he was screaming and yelling at me. He grabbed my cell phone and hung it up and put it in his pocket. He drugged me behind an abandoned house and raped me. And to add insult on top of injury, he also robbed me. Sorry, my son's in the other room. Parts I don't want him to hear. He sexually assaulted me, robbed me. And then he was about to leave, and I'm just like, can I at least have my cell phone back? And he's like, no, you're going to call the cops. And I'm just like, why would I? You got what you wanted already. So he took my cell phone out of his pocket, and I wasn't even thinking about this, but he took it and rubbed his fingerprints off of it and handed it back to me, and then, just kind of took off. And so, I did report it. There was really no purpose, because the police station never even sent it in for testing, because there was no law for it at the time like there is now in Illinois. So dealing with the repercussions of that, this is a point in time where we did not talk about mental health as a society. We did not. And I knew that it affected me, but I didn't realize how bad it was. Even just thinking back, like, I was so depressed. At first, after, like, the day after it happened, like, I didn't go into work. I kind of just, took a day at home and, just tried to block out everything. I mostly slept. But then after that, I just tried to move forward like nothing happened. And then that was even worse. That was probably the worst decision. What that ended up doing was making my PTSD even worse, and giving me just massive anxiety attacks, right? Like, could barely function, especially in a town like Chicago, where there are tons of people constantly moving around and, out and about. It drove me nuts. I was still on the bus at the time. And, anybody that's ever been on a Pace bus knows, like, them bitches get crowded, okay? Crowded. And this would just set off my PTSD in the worst way ever. I after the assault, I'm just like, I need to see everybody around me. Like, I need peripheral vision up in this bitch. Like, and if I couldn't, constantly see everybody around me, if there were constantly too many people around me, like, it was just so triggering and overwhelming to the point where I realized after a while, I was like, I can't do this anymore. I can't. Not to mention the boyfriend that I had at the time, that was a friend in high school. Like, that assault put our relationship, a huge strain on our relationship, and it had already been strained, and that was just the icing on the cake at that point. And so, any sexual assault victim can tell you, after being assaulted, it's very hard to be intimate with someone else again. But that only lasts for so long. I'll get to that in a moment. Yeah, for me, it was very hard for me to be intimate with him. And because of that, he ended up being intimate with another woman, which, I wasn't even mad at. I completely understood. It was just the lying part it was the lying part for me. Like, that was the part that got me. So yeah, it was just kind of dealing with it. At that point, I literally just felt like my life was a huge tornado, and everything was just like, it was just all this shit floating around. And I felt like I couldn't control any of it. Like, none of it. It was just all over the place. And it was like I was just holding on to something, but my arms are holding on to the ground on, a pole on the ground, but my body's still floating in the wind. Like, it was so much. It was so much. And so at that point, I was just like, you know what? Fuck this. Fuck it. I decided, I was like, you know what? My mom's not alive anymore. I loved my family, but I was like, I really don't want to be here. So I decided to up and move. And I moved to Springfield, Illinois, or as I call it, the cornfields. That shit is country as fuck. I hated it. Ugh! I hated that I stayed there as long as I did, but yeah, I'll get to why. Anyway, so yeah, about 4 months after the sexual assault, I was just like, fuck it. Everything was just such a shit show, and I wanted to go back to school. So I was like, you know what? I am going to up and move to Springfield. There is a U of I campus there. I can finish there, call it a day. If things were only that simple. There's more. So yeah, not even a week, blue skis. After getting there, I met my son's very narcissistic and abusive father. I think I was there for precisely 5 days before I met him, right? Here's the thing about sexual trauma. Is that it generally will cause 2 stages, and it really depends on how old you are when you experience that sexual trauma. And a lot of women don't talk about this, and I think that it is a subject that we definitely need to start talking about a little bit more, and that is how women respond to sexual trauma, right? If you are younger, generally your response to that sexual trauma is to become very inverted, like just very to yourself. And it also kind of depends on a couple of other factors. I won't get into it. It's too much. That's not what this video is about. But anyway, yeah. When you're older, and this is where a lot of older women, we're not honest with ourselves about this, and it's time that we be, because these choices that we're making in sexual partners all stem from trauma that has been unresolved, and it builds up and it builds up, and it leads to more bad decision making and more bad decision making. How do I know this, bitch? Because I've been there. She's done this. I do not preach or talk about anything I have not been through, right? So it had been about 4 months after the sexual assault. I had just met my son's father, and I was just like, you know what? Fuck it. And this is what a lot of sexual trauma victims do. They go in hoe mode, right? It is trying to learn to detach from having any type of emotional connection through sexual activity with a partner. So we normalize this hoe kind of phase, in women, not understanding that there's so much hurt behind this action. And a lot of us don't even realize it, because it took me years, and I mean years to realize this. But that was my response to the sexual assault at that point. I was like, you know what, whole phase. But little did I know, I was sleeping with the enemy. Yeah, so I started sleeping with him, and I've never been the type of woman that will very quickly sleep with a man, because I am the type of person, like, I need an emotional connection to you before I even attempt to make a physical one, right? But with him, I didn't care. All that was out the window. Yeah, and it was a horrible relationship. uh, a lot of narcissists, like, I ended up working with domestic violence victims after my stint with him, and I used to tell my clients all the time, like, it's like narcissists it's like you have a spotlight on you, or no, better yet, it's a sign. And it says, like, vulnerable, and that shit just flashes. It's like, that energetic signature that you carry around with you after you've been through all of this fucking bullshit. And they can spot that energetic signature in a minute. And once they spot it, it's like they latch onto you for dear life. It's like a leech. And that was basically what happened. I was in that energetic signature of trauma and hurt and pain. And so, yeah, he came in and picked up on that. And yeah, it was just kind of downhill from there. By time I did eventually come to the realization, like, you know what, I am even only entertaining this relationship with him because of that trauma. And literally by time I realized that, whoop, no, it was too late, because I was pregnant. And when I realized it, I was just like, girl, like, wow, okay, so yeah, that. And I could tell you stories for days between the two of us. He was very, very, very emotionally abusive. It was just so much. Like, to give you a perfect example of, like, once again, I tell you, she didn't struggled. He worked for the Park District in Springfield, which means that he worked seasonally. So from November until I think it was like beginning of April, he was off of work and he got unemployment, which in my mind, I'm like, that's perfect, because I was still trying to finish school at the time. And I was in my last semester, and I'm like, that's perfect. My son's birthday is in October. So I'm like, by the time my maternity leave is up in 6 weeks, you'll be off of work. You can watch him so I can work and finish school. Don't have to worry about the extra expensive daycare. It's perfect, right? No, that's not the way narcissists work, right? I don't even remember what we got into an argument about, but there was something that he wanted me to do that I would not do. I refused. And because of that, he's just like, fine, figure it out on your own. And he refused to watch my son. And, all my moms out there, how hard it is to find childcare, especially in a small town, because Springfield is not that big. The population was like 115,000, if that. And so, there were waiting lists for childcare. So at that point, I was very screwed, right? He was paying child support. I was able to use that child support to pay my rent. But there was 1 month, like, I couldn't. I would, like, have friends that I knew, people, coworkers, that would help me out and watch him here and there. But, I was not able to work consistently. And, I was able to, put a little bit here on, light bills and, phone bills and keep stuff on. But there was 1 month in particular where, like, it was a December. So, people are worried about holidays and, stuff like getting Christmas gifts and stuff like that. And yeah, like, I struggled that month, and like, I couldn't keep up. And like, I had a little bit of money to buy groceries. But the groceries that I ended up buying, like, I had a growing baby at the time. And I'm like, my baby needs to eat. And so most of the time I wouldn't. I lost 10 pounds in 1 month, because all the food that I had in my house, it was literally just enough to feed my child and not me. So I starved. And that was like I didn't even realize it at the time because there was just mentally just so much going on. Like, I look back on it and I'm just like, ooh, like it was a hard time. And I just remember like I was like, I couldn't see how to figure it out. Eventually, some weeks later, I did end up figuring it out a little bit, kind of, sort of, a little bit, enough, to kind of get me back on track. So yeah, fast forward a little bit, when my son was like 3 months, I ended up parting ways with his dad because I realized, he wasn't going to be a good influence on my child. And there was no way in hell my child was going to grow up to treat women the way his father treated me. So I was just like, yeah, I'm going to need you to stay over there. Over there. Go over there. Just go and stay over there. But nonetheless, that didn't stop him from constantly stalking me, repeatedly calling me. Y'all know how, the story go with the narcissist. He was a typical narcissist. But funny how the universe works. I had a girlfriend at the time who worked in domestic violence, and she was leaving that job to complete her PhD program. And she kept begging me to take it. She's like, I know you would be perfect for it. Like, just please, please, please. And eventually I got tired of serving tables. So I was just like, fine. I took the job and I got it. And I didn't, know anything about, really abusive relationships, details, or, anything about that. So in Illinois, when you work in those fields, you have to get training. Like, you have to be able to spot an abusive relationship. You have to be able to spot a victim. You have to know signs, abuser manipulation tactics, all those different types of things, right? And so as I'm getting training, I'm like sitting there watching, and I'm just like, oh, this man ain't crazy, because for the longest, that's what I thought he was. I literally just thought he was crazy, right? I'm like, yeah, no, he's not crazy. He's an abusive asshole. So, that job, it was a blessing and a curse. It was a curse because, I didn't study social work when I went to school. And so that job was so stressful because I had no concept of self-care. I didn't know about secondary PTSD, compassion fatigue, or any of that. And like, when I tell y'all, because I had been through it, like, I was going hard for my clients. Like, I was going so hard. Like, bitch, I want to see you win. Like, if I did it, you can too. So yeah, that ended up putting me in complete exhaustion. But also at the same time, because, at that point in my life, since I had my son, I'm like, I've always been an intentional person, but I'm like, now I got to be like 8 times as intentional. So, I made it a point to observe and watch people and their behaviors and what they say and what they do and how they treat others. And so I can spot a narcissist from a mile away. Like, sometimes I'll be, standing in store in a grocery line, and I'll look at a couple and I'm like, oof, he is beating the shit out of her. And sometimes people are like, how do you know? And I'm just like, I see abusive people. Like, that's just my sixth sense. So, once again, it was a lesson though, and these things don't happen to you, they happen for you. Not only was the universe trying to show me how to walk in my strength, how to know my power, how to really and truly walk away, because when I tell you that man has no access to my energy and it drives him fucking nuts, yeah, she mastered that. Like, I completely did. Like, he don't even have the ability to faze me no more, and his desperation over it is so real, and it is just the funniest thing on the face of the earth to me. So, there's always a way to outsmart the narcissist, especially as a woman, because most of the time we tend to be smarter than them anyway. Not that it's just women in abusive relationships. Like, I know, ain't nobody got time for extra comments or anything. So, but yeah, so I did that social work for a little bit, 6.5 years, not really a little bit, right? But it was so fucking stressful, right? It was the compassion fatigue. It was the secondary PTSD. It was the total disregard for victims that I would see every day in the courtrooms, because I worked as a legal advocate. I would help them, fill out for orders of protections and, help them when they needed to file criminal charges, or help them with divorce cases and family cases and all that other fun stuff. And so, I spent a great majority of my time in the courtroom. And, another example, this was a female judge, okay? A female judge. She told my client one day, Well, he only hit you once, so I'm not going to grant your order of protection. This was another woman saying this to another woman. Like, I feel my blood pressure raising even just talking about this because, being an empath, like I would take on that frustration for my victims. There would be so many times where I knew these women needed these orders, but, the courts chose not to recognize and interpret the laws how they want to interpret, misogyny on the bench. I mean, it was so fucking much. It was so much. But here was the problem. This was another learning lesson from the universe. At the time, there had been a big block of funding that had been released for these types of programs from the federal government. And so my agency was one of the agencies to get some of that money, and I got a huge increase in my salary because we were salaried employees. Now, before, because I got that raise 4 years into the job, right? So 4 years into the job, and I'm just like, okay, I knew the raise was coming maybe about, 6 months before we actually got it. So I'm like, we about to make this money, bitch. We gonna be on point. You be good. Like I thought in my mind, the way my mind was working at the time, I thought that making this extra income, having this extra money would mean that I wouldn't be as stressed out. Because for a while I was still working at the part-time job because I wasn't making any money from there. So I'm like, it'll allow me to not be as stressed out. Like, it'll just, I thought it would make everything better. And the universe was like, message. It did not. It did not. And I lied to myself for like the first maybe year and a half or so. But then also at some point, that was also when I started my spiritual awakening too. So then, down in my soul, I was just like, no, this ain't it. This ain't it. Now, I was like, I can still help victims. I don't have to work in an agency to do it. And so, I tried to start my own, started my own coaching business, which is, why I do spiritual coaching. Eventually, I had to let that go. I realized it wasn't serving me anymore. It was just so energetically and emotionally draining. So I was like, yeah, no, I got to let this go. Plus, I realized that I was being called to do something else. I was like, okay, time to move on. So yeah, after I realized I couldn't do it anymore, I was like, no, it's time to go. It's time to go. And so I took a leap of faith. One summer, I have a sister that lives here in Atlanta. And one summer I came to visit her for like a week, right? And in Springfield, Illinois, after my awakening, like I was already sensitive to energy, but I started realizing how sensitive it was. Like there were certain things that I would notice, like all the time when I would go to Chicago to visit home, and I would leave from Springfield, I would do it, quite often. I would notice like a difference in just like the energy, but I didn't realize it was the energy at the time. I was just like, oh yeah, it feels different. Like, I just thought maybe it was because it was a bigger city, more people, whatever. I didn't really think too much about it, right? But then I started realizing how sensitive to energy I was. And so when we got to Atlanta, like, it was like the best, biggest breath of fresh air you could ever imagine. Like I was elated. I was like, I need to be here. And because of my awakening, I realized that I was being called to do more things, to do other things. So I was like, yeah, maybe the universe wants me to take that leap. Maybe the universe wants me to take that leap. So I decided to take that leap. There's some other parts to the story, which, eventually I'll get to that at some other point. But I decided to take the leap, and I quit that job that I was making so much money at. I decided to cash out my retirement account, and I just up and moved to Atlanta. Like, I want to say within like a 2.5 month period after I came to visit. Like, I was just like, fuck it. I was already preparing to move anyway. I was manifesting to move. Like, I had boxes in my house packed up. Like, I already had this notion that I was not meant to be where I was any longer. So I knew it was coming. But you know, Atlanta, it was a little bit of a surprise to me. So, yeah, I took a leap of faith, and you know, I'm like, I can work on my business, and meet new people, and all this other stuff. Not how it happened. I took that leap, and it was like, yep, I fell flat on my fucking face. Like nothing worked out the way I planned it to. And at that point, I had pretty much put myself in financial ruin. Like I was devastated, like, and cried to the universe, like, why, why, like, yeah. And it was real. I was so fucking stressed out to the point where, like, I ate endlessly. And it's really hard to deal with external stresses when you're also trying to find your way on your spiritual path, because there's just it can be a lot sometimes, and that's the point that I got to, where I was just like, oh my god, this is so fucking much. But eventually things did work out, things did smooth over. It took a while, but this is the thing, the key to all of it was literally just me understanding that, I was giving myself too much of myself to others. And I wasn't getting anything back, which led me to so many of the situations I was in. Like every single one of them, I'm like, yep, my intuition told me to do this, but I did this. Yep, my intuition told me to do this, but I did this. Yeah, my intuition told me to do this, but I did this. Like it was terrible. And I'm just like, okay, now I see what the lesson in that was. And because of that spiritual growth, like it completely elevated me to a different level. So yeah. A lot, right? And I mean, if you think that's a lot, like, motherfuckers, I was just scratching the surface. Like there are so many other little itty bitty tiny events that happen in between all those other ones that I just explained to you. Like to even try to go into those right now, like it would just be, this video would be like 3 damn hours long, right? I've been told so many times I need to write a book, and eventually I will. But even before I started making this video, like I was just like, ugh, just thinking about going through, because I can't help but, if I'm thinking about a certain situation, like those same emotions will kind of come up. And it's not in the same way, like I don't feel hurt or anything like that. I just feel that pull, that drain, like that energetic space that I was in at that time. So, it sometimes it's a lot to talk about, especially for me. And there was so much to process, but just know, like, all of these things do not happen to hurt you. They happen to help you. They happen so that you learn to walk in your power. They happen for you to learn to understand, to be the divine being that you were meant to be. None of it is ever meant to tear you down. It is meant to build you up. That's what we don't understand about life a lot of the time, is that everything is a choice. It is a choice. You can choose to let it break you, or you can choose to let it make you. Which one will you do? But here's the tricky part too. If you choose to let it break you, guess what? You're not just going to break from that situation. Every other situation that you endure after that the universe is going to throw at you because you didn't learn the lesson the first time, every other situation is going to start to break you too. And then you put yourself in a point where it becomes more and more and more difficult to heal, because you've piled more and more and more stuff on top of the very root of the problem to begin with. Sometimes that's how we make our own bed of shit. It's making a bad decision and then continuing to make bad decisions after that. When you learn from the lesson the first time, you do not make bad decisions. You understand at a deeper level what the universe is trying to show you and tell you, where the universe is trying to lead you. I see, and I mean, like, when I tell you, it is crazy It is so crazy. Like, especially the past couple of months, because I've been going through so many upgrades. Like, it is just crazy how I can read energy and just see like what people are going through, even though they put on this great facade on the outside, right? Because that is the illusion that we live in today. Everybody acting like their life is perfect and they're so happy and things are so grand, when in actuality, it is the exact fucking opposite. The exact opposite. Most of these people are fucking miserable. And the only place that they're happy is on the gram. That's all they have to show for their life is, a roll of pictures that they post on social media. They can't tell you anything new and exciting and new endeavors or anything like that. The only time they can brag is if it's about material wealth. What about your spiritual wealth? What about that, though? That's what I'm interested in. Have you healed enough so that you're still not making all the shitty decisions that you used to in the past? Like, that's what I want to hear about. You get all that superficial stuff because nobody wants to dig deep into the darker parts. That it's like a way to run away from even focusing on that. Let me focus on this so I don't have to focus on that. Let me make it look like I look good here so nobody knows I don't look good here. There are so many spirits that people are affected with nowadays and they don't even realize it. And these spirits will come for you. They will, because you are light and they see that. No matter how much you try to dim it or turn it down or hide it in a corner, it won't work. And they'll come for you every time. But this is a part of the lesson of the universe for you to understand and know your power. It happens to you for a reason. Because you're strong enough to handle it. What's that old saying? If God brought you to it, he can bring you through it. Because that's just literally what it is. And I got to a point, it was like standing, in line with a baseball bat. Something come my way. Boom. What you got next, universe? Oh, this over here. All right. Boom. It was also a good way to kind of teach me the art of detachment too. Because then, when something happens, it's like, okay, sorry. Think about it. All right. Got a solution. It is all to teach you to be able to become more in line with the universe and enter a state of flow so your life does not become as difficult. We may seem to think that these things happen to us because life is trying to make our life difficult, but no, it's not. It's really trying to show us these are your flaws. These things are happening because you're making the wrong decisions. And if you change these things, then you can lead a less difficult life. And it's when we don't change those things, then our life is still difficult and we blame everybody else for causing the problems when it was never them. It's us. We have to be able to take that self-accountability. So, all right, I think I'm going to be done ranting and raving. I think my child is probably hungry. But ladies, just know, hard times, they make you stronger. They meant to be the badass bitch that you were meant to be so that you just plow through bullshit and stay on your throne while being fucking unbothered as shit. So yeah, keep that in mind. I wish you nothing but the best. I love you guys so much. And until next time, booskies.